So, Leanne and Cheng, it looks like we've got a lot of people connected. Shall we? I don't want to leave the bus station early here. Would that be very New York of me?
Very true, Kellyanne. It would be. It would be. Well, one thing, we have a video that it's a 2-minute video that we were hoping to show yesterday. Good morning, everybody. I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Iwrn. I work for the UN Water Technical Advisory Unit. It's amazing to see so many familiar faces, lots of, well, not your faces, but names, and also a lot of new names. We are really happy to have you here. And I think what we'll do, Kellyanne, as people join, is show a very quick video that we wanted to show yesterday in New York, but we just didn't have time. So we'll start with that. It's 2 minutes, and then you can pick up and start the event.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone.
And Leanne, I'm not sure that the sound's coming through. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Yeah, it's true. The sound is not working, but we can read the text. So and we're already halfway through the video.
Great. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and excellencies, dear colleagues, and friends of water and sanitation around the world. I'd love to welcome you to the SDG 6 special event virtual dialogue today. It's such a pleasure to be here in my capacity as the Vice Chair of UN Water, which, as many of you know, is the coordination mechanism in the United Nations system for water and sanitation. As I think we've said, it's so encouraging to see so many familiar faces and names joining us today. And if you haven't done so already, please do introduce yourself in the chat box, just so we have a sense of who is joining us for today's event. So as many of you know, in 2020, the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework was launched during the High Level Political Forum, which is, as many of you know, taking place right now here in New York. So it is the 2-year anniversary of launching the Global Acceleration Framework. And this framework has really aimed to help unify the international community's support and strengthen our UN system-wide collaboration collaboration at country level to be able to deliver faster and better integrated results for SDG 6. And to gain momentum kind of behind and through the Global Acceleration Framework, we've used the occasion of the HLPF every year to be able to have this special event to create a moment where we can share good practices and our learning and take stock on accelerating the progress towards SDG 6. We know that this is a special event, and as many of us know that 2023 has been called the Year of Water Ambition, and so this is going to be the special event, which will be the last one before the upcoming water conference. And we know that we can use this SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework to really help us to boost and to reset our approach to water and sanitation management as we move forward into the second half of the SDGs and the Water Action Decade. And many of you may have watched yesterday's event, the SDG 6 special event, which took place in person here in New York. And in that event, we had the co-hosts of the UN 2023 Water Conference, the Secretary General of the conference, the President of the General Assembly-elect, the PGA-elect, who updated us all on the preparations of the 2023 Water Conference. We also heard from countries who had prepared the preparatory meetings, and they shared the outcomes and recommendations that provided many valuable inputs as we've moved forward on our roadmap to March 2023. But we're all very, very pleased and encouraged to receive this tremendous political support, which is absolutely critical to be able to advance the water and sanitation agenda at country level. So reflecting now as we kind of look forward to the UN 2023 Water Conference, we know that there will be a lot of attention on how, as the UN water family, we are prepared to support countries to meet their water and sanitation objectives. And this really gives us the opportunity to ask ourselves, how can we improve our coordination? How can we rationalize the UN's water and sanitation architecture? And what can we commit to in March 2023? So today we're going to use the opportunity of our SDG 6 special event to be able to have a deeper discussion on these topics. And as you know from our program today, we will have 2 panel discussions. So for each one of these panel discussions, we will, after the panel, we will open the floor for interventions. So please do raise your hand if you would like to take the floor and share your inputs into the topics of the panels. So before I give the floor to the co-hosts of the UN 2023 Water Conference, who we're so pleased to have with us today, we're going to show a video that has been produced by SIWI on the UN 2023 Water Conference. So now over to the video.
Water is a resource with many shapes and forms, and by nature, it connects different environments, peoples, and sectors. Water is irreplaceable for life to survive and thrive. Water is a unifying and catalyzing force. It can be the deal maker for creating a more sustainable world.
Water underpins all of our social and economic activity. Without water, food production stops. Cities cease to function. Economic activity grinds to a halt, and fertile land turns into a desert.
We have massive challenges in front of us, and to steer the world in the right direction, we need to join forces and take action. The UN 2023 Water Conference will be this moment.
Tajikistan and the Netherlands, as co-hosts of the conference, strive to make it a watershed moment for the world. So let's join our efforts, take commitments and put actions on the ground to make this happen.
We have an important task to encourage all stakeholders, to bring together all our pledges, promises and commitments, and to make clear how the world will reach its water-related goals.
Many things were politically unclear at that time. Now, the young leaders should be given a leading role by their governments in order to be active in the next decade.
Water does not only pose a challenge, it also presents us with great opportunity. We need to act and foster a fundamental shift in how we look at and manage water more than ever.
Imagine what kind of world we could live in if its leaders had just a fraction of the idealism that we share as young people.
So thanks very much to Siwi for producing that video. And now diving into our program today, it's my great pleasure to welcome the co-hosts of the conference who you've just seen, of course, in the video from Tajikistan and the Netherlands, who are with us here today. Representing Tajikistan, I would love to warmly welcome Mr. Sultan Brahimzoda, the Special Envoy of the President of the Republic of Tajikistan on Water Affairs. And representing the Netherlands, I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Henk Ovink, the Special Envoy for International Water Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And thank you both for joining us today, and nice to see you together this morning. We are really pleased that you're here to be able to join us, and of course, for all the leadership and partnership from your countries as the co-hosts of the Water Conference. So now we're going to hand the floor over to you for your intervention.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dear friends from the UN Water family, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to address you in this event about the preparations to our 2023 conference, and most importantly about the outcome of this conference, about the Water Action Agenda. Taking this opportunity, I would like to thank our partners for organization of this event, UN Water, UN DESA, of course the Netherlands, to have this opportunity basically to go in depth about this very important moment of the 2023 conference. And it is my pleasure that my friend and brother Henk Ovink is sitting here with me in our Tajikistan mission. So now we have the second home for us, basically, the Netherlands for Tajik people and the Tajikistan for the Dutch people. So Henk, you're welcome, and thank you here. Thank you for coming and joining. So dear friends, the UN 2023 Water Conference is approaching us. We have around 8 months ahead of us to come to New York to make the change as we wish, basically. In April, we had briefings in Geneva and in New York on the UN 2023 Water Conference. We used the platforms of the Bonn Water Dialogues, COP26, World Water Week in Stockholm, the Group of Friends of Water meeting in New York, the 9 World Water Forum, 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit, Dushanbe Water Decade Conference, and UN Ocean Conference in Portugal to brief the world community about the conference, its goals and objectives, importance and possible outcomes. But most important for us, co-chairs in this process, were also to receive your vision, ideas, suggestions, and expectations, how to make the conference a big success, how to contribute to this process, what should be the most impactful outcome of the conference, and how to make it a watershed moment for the world. The Dushanbe conference in June became a real milestone in preparation for the 2023 conference. It made a significant contribution to linking the chain of the regional and global events with the UN 2023 conference. Yesterday in the meeting, I mentioned that the speeches by Honorable President of Tajikistan and Prime Minister of the Netherlands, with special focus on the 2023 conference, special pavilion, special session, media briefing, interviews, and the valuable intervention at the closing session attracted a lot of attention of the participants to the historical water conference in 2023. But the most important outcome of the Dushanbe conference in terms of the 2023 conference is the launching of the Water Action Agenda, a transformative voluntary mechanism of the 2023 conference, which should bring together the commitments from around the world to catalyze and accelerate the actions and commitments to achieve SDG 6 and other water-related goals, which is basically also the aim and the goal of the International Decade for Action Water for Sustainable Development, the midterm review of which will be in the focus of the 2023 conference. This idea, as well as other initiatives, were included in the draft Dushanbe Declaration, which was broadly discussed among the UN member states and other stakeholders before the conference in a very inclusive and transparent manner. And of course, happily, the Water Action Agenda, as an outcome of the 2023 conference, has been supported with big enthusiasm by member states and other stakeholders in this process. Of course, a lot of efforts have been put on the ground to find this support. Tajikistan and the Netherlands organized a number of meetings bilaterally, multilaterally, virtually, and in person to explain the main idea, expectation, and valuable contribution of the Water Action Agenda to make the change. The conference in 2023 will not have a negotiated outcome document, you know about this, but we don't have a time to wait another 50 years. That's why Tajikistan and the Netherlands, as co-chairs, are striving to use this momentum and opportunity to make the real change. And Water Action Agenda provides a real tool to achieve this. But for this, of course, we cannot do it alone. We need for your support, the support of the world community, the support of UN member states, international financial institutions, international organizations, and all stakeholders, basically. We need the commitments from all these stakeholders to actions and partnerships. And it's a really good opportunity we have to use. So I didn't go in details about what is the action agenda and how it should work. And I would like now to give the floor to my friend Hank to go in depth in this issue. What is the action agenda? Why it is necessary? Who and how can contribute to this process, to it basically, and etc. So thank you very much for your attention. And Hank, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Sultan, first of all, for hosting me in my second home here in New York. And thanks, of course, Kellyanne and the team of UN Water and the team of UN DESA for supporting us. And of course, Sultan, the government of Tajikistan, and our partnership in this also shows how important it is that we show the world that countries coming from different regions, cultures, and backgrounds can not only unite on water, but it is really adding value if we unite on water, and we can come up with pathways and solutions towards that more sustainable, just, and resilient society. So every day we take inspiration from each other in this process. That is also something that we want to bring to the conference. Many stepping stones towards that conference, Sultan addressed. The important thing in the outcome is indeed the Water Action Agenda, where all the commitments have to come together. The Water Action Agenda was presented in Dushanbe in the Dushanbe conference. It is an online platform. If you go, actually easily, if you Google UN 2023 Water Conference, the first or second hit is already the conference. And if you look at the website, you can find the Water Action Agenda there. It is the place where you can provide all your commitments. The conference has three principles: inclusivity, cross-sectorality, and action orientation. And the first one, being inclusive, also goes for the actions. We work around the world in many places, as well as in our own regions, and we take inspiration from the many small and bigger steps. So commitments are not only big to be impactful and beautiful, they can also be very small and cultural. A school working on a water program can add its commitment to make sure that there's a connection with other schools in their region or across the world to help get this ripple effect, this watershed moment, as Sultan said. We hope to see many of the smaller scale commitments that really touch upon the culture on how we value water across the world. The second layer of this Water Action Agenda is, of course, about the institutions, our national governments, but also our MDB's financial partners like the World Bank, ADB, and others, our institutional partners from the UN, institutional partners from the private sector, from NGOs, partners alone and together in coalitions that can come forward and should come forward with commitments that really have an impact. Not replicating mistakes from the past, but identifying those commitments that work and scale them in the context of this water action agenda. Because we all know we can start with doom and gloom, we're off track, but we think with this water action agenda, we show a pathway towards resiliency, sustainability, equity, and beyond in the context of the 2030 agenda. So the action agenda is a mechanism to deliver through water as a lever, as a way to deliver on the 2030 agenda. Two layers in that water action agenda that together will be substantial, but we think not enough. So the last, and perhaps that's the tip of the iceberg or the pyramid on top, are the game changers. And we don't expect many of them because they will be tough and often perhaps even heard in the way we now develop policies and practices, how we work and organize ourselves, how markets fail, but then are embedded in rules and regulation. How can we really use next year's conference as a way to get to transitions, transformations, game changers that really help us get on track? Because, you know, if we take reality, we're off. If we use the conference to get on track, we have 46 years to deliver on that. Well, that will be too long. We only have 7 after 2023. Next year also is the Future Summit in September, with many themes that align with the conference. So we look for these 3 layers of commitments to bring together in the water action. Almost last point, the work is not over with the conference, it's only starting. Although Sultan and I sometimes joke and say that a vacation will be after the conference, actually the work will start after the conference, so we have to negotiate about our vacation. But the implementation, scaling and replication of those commitments will be the most important. And for that, it is not enough to have a commitment. We need the support to be able to deliver. We need to have evaluation and validation in place to make sure that we identify what works on those commitments so we can scale and replicate, but also that we know what doesn't work so we can change and help innovate. And I think that follow-up process of support, UN Water, UN DESA, and our whole, the whole family are helping us in the context of what governments would provide. In the context of the HLPF, we won't replicate those mechanisms, but there will be many coalitions, public and private, that not easily fit within such systems. So we have to make sure that transparency and accountability are there to be able to learn, progress, scale and replicate those commitments that really work. So the support mechanism coming after is something we are very much committed to make sure that it is not an empty promise, but a true commitment with a support process, at least all the way until 2030. The commitments, of course, also will be organized in this water action agenda. And yesterday at the SDG 6 event, we presented the first draft of the themes of the interactive dialogues. Water for health, water for development, water for climate, resiliency and environment, water for cooperation, and the water action decade is the 5 main themes that we will discuss among member states and the UN family and the world and agree upon at the President of the General Assembly event, end of October, beginning of November, to structure the conference. And we can imagine that these 3 layers of commitments are also structured along the themes of the conference to make sure that it becomes actionable, it becomes workable, and it becomes something that we can deliver on. We look forward to your ideas. We look forward to get your input on who to target for those 3 layers of commitment. We also look forward to have follow-up conversations on those game changes. What are the 3 to 5 game changes that we can put on the table next year as a global community to see change that we so much need? Thanks very much, Sultan and the team here and the Tajik mission. Thank you, Kellyanne, for organizing and hosting UN Water and UN DESA in this conversation. We look forward to your input.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ovink and Mr. Ramzoda, for joining us today and this important update. It's great to see how all of this is coming together. And thanks for sharing the proposed themes for the interactive dialogue. I know that's something that those here were very interested to hear about, and also for sharing your vision and practical orientations on the water action agenda. I think, you know, thinking of it as a mechanism and lever to deliver these game changers, I think is something that we can really, you know, dig into. So as the UN Water family, we very much look forward to continuing working together with you. And as you said, Sultan, to make this a watershed moment for the world. So thanks so much for being here and for joining this conversation today. So now that we've heard the co-host's vision on the water action agenda, we're going to move forward now to our first panel, because we really want to hear insights from UN Water members and partners on how we can move towards the water action agenda voluntary commitments. So now I would like to hand over to the moderator of the first panel, Ms. Alexandra Kinichevich, the Managing Director and Market Development and Communications for the Toilet Board Coalition. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Kellyanne.
Yeah, there you are. We see you and hear you.
Excellent. Really excited to be with you all today. The Toilet Board Coalition is one of the newest members of UN Water, and so we're really honored and grateful to have the opportunity to moderate what should be a very rich and interesting conversation amongst our panelists. We will strive to keep to time and move through their interventions so that we have adequate time for your questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat as they come up, and we will work to address those as soon as possible. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Mr. Pablo Berquierta from GWP. Mr. Berquierta, what can GWP contribute to the water action agenda?
Hello, everybody. It is a real pleasure for me to be here at this meeting. Let me share with you our speech here with our main ideas, and then we can later on exchange on that. So for us, and for me in particular, I'd like to thank UN Water for inviting GWP to speak at this important event. This is one of my first public speaking engagements at GWP's new chair, and I am honored that this is in this event. GWP has made accelerating progress towards the water-related SDGs, central part of the 2020-2025 strategy. However, that will not be achievable for any one organization on its own, or even by the whole water community. That is the spirit of the water action agenda, so GWP will be pleased to fully support it and make many different contributions to it. I'd like to mention two partnerships that GWP is actively engaged in example of what we could contribute. The first is the Continental Africa Water Investment Program, or AIP, which was adopted by the Assembly of the African Union Heads of State and Government in 2021, and which is supported by an international high-level panel on water investments for Africa, comprising current and former heads of states and global leaders, which was formally launched in March 2022. The AIP aims to close the water investment gap in Africa by mobilizing $30 billion a year by 2030. The leadership and commitment of heads of state is vital to break down institutional silos and achieve that ambitious but necessary goal. The second is the SDG 6 IWRN support program, which GWP operates with our partners at UNEP, UNEP-DHI, UNEP-CAPNet. The support program improves water governance to accelerate progress towards the water-related SDGs by bringing together stakeholders at the national level to collectively monitor, plan, and implement relevant water-related actions. It has assisted 72 countries so far in different parts of this process, helping them to collaboratively define over 300 high-impact actions that are really made investment opportunities. In this type of conference, we often hear of many great innovative mechanisms, such as the two-part I've just presented. I'm sure it will be the same in New York next year. Solutions to the global water crisis definitely exist. But why then is the world not on track to reach the 2030 water-related goals? Some of the answers can be found within the voluntary national reviews that countries submit to the HLPF to report on their progress and challenges. Nearly all countries have submitted at least one VNR, and over 70% have reported specifically on the SDG 6. GWP has studied these VNRs to understand better what countries can identify as obstacles to need to be overcome. Here I would like to highlight just two of them. Most countries do not have sufficient monitoring systems or data to report on all the SDGs indicators. It is difficult to manage what you don't measure. The second one is that most countries report insufficient finance for full implementation of the national strategies. If you don't finance them, you will not reach to the goals. On the monitoring system, GWP is part of a group of organizations which, through the Water and Climate Coalition, is working towards the establishment of a global water information system. We feel strongly that such a system has to be based on national and sub-national data in order to produce precise, actionable data for decision makers. Improving the governance of data and democratizing both data production and access will be key to the success of the global water information system. That would be another commitment to the Water Action Agenda. On the question of finance, we have recently started a learning journey on financing for water security as part of the SDG 6 Iwrn support program, aiming to understand where the bottlenecks lie. Some initial conclusions are the need for more connectors between the finance community and the water community, who can align not just the language, but also the information and data needs, risk mitigation strategies, and governance frameworks. It is also clear that we need to make better use of existing funding in addition to attracting innovative funding sources to water. Concluding this learning journey and helping to bridge the water and finance communities would be one more commitment we could make to the agenda. Finally, I'd like to say that it is clear that we, with small incremental changes, will not achieve our goals by 2030. We therefore need a system change, significantly moving and modifying the way we value and interact with natural resources with an innovative mindset based on our new realities. We cannot let the thinking of the past hold us back. Through projects like the SDG Iwrn support program and the AIP, and in everything else we do, GWP stands ready to partner not just with the usual suspects, but also with the many sectors that interact with water resources, to be an active part of the system change. That is what we believe should be the spirit of the Water Action Agenda and the 2023 Water Conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate those interventions and what incredibly robust contributions that GWP is making along the lines of advancing water governance. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we have some questions coming through. We will absolutely get to them later in the session. Now, we'd like to turn our attention specifically to how we can engage in with other intergovernmental processes. So, Mr. Mark Gordon, I'm going to come over to you next. Mark Gordon is Senior Coordinator of Midterm Review of the Sendai Framework at the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Mr. Gordon, the midterm review of the Sendai Framework will also take place in 2023. Can you tell us about what are the opportunities to synergize these two midterm reviews? Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and good morning, distinguished delegates, friends and colleagues. We're delighted to have the opportunity today to provide a brief update of the state of play of the midterm review of the Sendai Framework, which I hope many of you are aware runs concurrently to the midterm review of the Water Action Decade. And as many of you have already contributed, you'll be aware that this provides us with numerous opportunities to provide substantive inputs to the review of the Sendai Framework by the water community, given its centrality to our relationship with risk, as well as how we, the risk reduction, risk management community, can inject risk-based perspectives into the review of the water community and associated actors. So I'll just show a few slides as I'm talking to try and illustrate some of the elements that have been coming through in the midterm review process, which similarly to that for the Water Action Decade represents a retrospective piece, which tries to understand elements of progress made against the outcome and goals, yes, of the Sendai Framework, but perhaps more importantly in the context of risk-informed, sustainable and regenerative development. And taking what we have understood in that progress within the notion of establishing how has context changed since the moment, that pivotal moment in 2015 when so many important agreements, conventions and frameworks were adopted, and applying that learning within the frame of a changed context into recommendations as to how we can renovate risk governance and risk management approaches across all domains, sectors and scales, so that we have a fighting chance of dealing with 21st century risks before they manifest as shocks, some of which can be existential. So the work to date has been extremely encouraging. There is much activity afoot globally, regionally, nationally, and thematically within the midterm review of the Sendai Framework, engaging actors that span sectors and major groups, disciplines, and domains. It's been extremely encouraging to see the uptake of both stakeholders and member states. I suspect a signal that communities, constituencies, and countries are according the understanding, management, and reduction of risk greater and growing priority, recognizing that in the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, and one could argue other threats and shocks from cybersecurity to a possible looming global food crisis and broader issues of peace and security, that these impel us all to fundamentally revisit our relationship with risk, to renovate how we know risk individually and collectively, how we collaborate, how we incorporate and price risk more realistically in all actions and financial transactions, how we decide, how we determine accessibility to, as well as the deployment of finance, how we invest in a way that sees that finance, that capital being able to be deployed at the service of, rather than to the detriment to, humans and the ecosystems on which we depend. Next slide, please. In recognition of the centrality of a better understanding and managing risk in our collective efforts, next slide, please. Our collective efforts to promote and support sustainable and regenerative development. The success of the midterm review is predicated on the degree to which principally it upholds the guiding principles of the Sendai Framework, and especially aspects of all of state institutions and all of society engagement, elements that are, I'm sure, resonating very deeply in the midterm review of the Water Action Decade. and the degree to which the midterm review can be integrated into all other global stock-taking and review exercises as we move into the pivotal year of 2023. Next slide. And of course, with the water conference taking place in March, back one, please. With the water conference taking place in March, this is a crucial inflection point. Can you reverse one slide, please? This is a crucial inflection point for multiple domains. And you will hear this coming through in the narrative and discourse of many constituencies, but not least of which the Secretary General of the UN. Of course, the Water Conference sets the scene in terms of how we renovate our understanding of our relationship with the centrality of water to multiple elements, to food systems, to energy transitions, to transportation, et cetera, et cetera. And that kicks us off rather well into the high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the midterm review of the Sendai Framework, which initially was not intended by member states, but I suspect that in recognition of the impact and the reality of the cascading consequences of, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic, this notion of better understanding our relationship with risk as states, as other communities and stakeholders and constituencies was accorded or needed to be accorded greater political identity. And so the President of the General Assembly will call a high-level meeting on the midterm review of the Sendai Framework in May of 2023. And these will provide critical context, input, and recommendations. I beg your pardon, we've skipped back too many slides now. Let's go to the fourth slide, thank you. Providing critical context, input, and recommendations for the quadrennial review of the SDGs Summit, the Summit of the Future, COP28, and multiple others. For one of the primary objectives of the midterm review, could we please go to slide 4, is promoting a risk-based discourse as the connecting tissue to nurture and encourage convergence, integration of thought and activity across multiple agendas, frameworks, to allow us to utilize that which we know better and enhance our understanding of the systemic nature of risk to support risk-informed decision-making among all sectors, geographies, and domains. Can we please move forward 3 slides? Thank you. So in terms of the timelines, many of the members of the water community have been already contributing to the midterm review of the Sendai Framework. Thank you. To the timeline, please. And there are still opportunities for the water constituency to contribute to the review exercise. Previous slide, please. From review and recommendations by organizations, constituencies, and major groups, domain experts, including through a dedicated survey designed for the water community launched at the Dushanbe conference, and that remains open until the 22nd of July of this year, but also through the UNDRR stakeholder engagement mechanism, a preliminary report for which was produced as an input to the recently concluded Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction in May in Indonesia, but of course also additional focus group discussions and inputs covering, amongst others, women's empowerment and leadership in risk reduction, civil engineers, ecosystems-based services, migration and displacement, transportation, and many others. For those UN system entities, there is an opportunity to contribute both individually as organizations and as constituent domains. And there are a series of thematic reviews that cover topics that are central to some of the reflections of the water community moving into the water conference next year, from sustainable food systems within planetary boundaries to planetary health issues to fundamentally the pricing of risk within a financial system. And this will all conclude in the production of a report that will inform a political process that begins in January of 2023 and that will run through until the high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the midterm review of the Sendai Framework in May, where there will be a political declaration adopted that will feed into those other processes that I mentioned earlier. So thank you, moderator, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Gordon. What an incredible opportunity for us all to engage, and we thank you for coming in and sharing with it, sharing about it. with us today. Next, we'd like to look to another commitment framework, which is Sanitation and Water for All's mutual accountability mechanism. So we have Ms. Lucinda O'Hanlon with us today, who is the head of policy and strategy at Sanitation and Water for All. Ms. O'Hanlon, what are some of the lessons learned from SWA's experience managing the mutual accountability mechanism commitment platform? And if possible, I ask you to please try and keep to the allotted 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator, and warm greetings to everyone joining this meeting from Geneva. Really, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. The Water Action Agenda is an incredible opportunity for all of us and our partners across the sector and outside the sector to commit to transformative actions that can build momentum that is desperately needed to achieve SDG 6, as the first speaker was saying in the panel. At the Sanitation and Water for All partnership, the process of securing and reporting on commitments has been part of our DNA since our inception. We've learned a lot over the years about how to build the supportive environment to ensure that commitments are truly about translating promises into action and aspirations into reality. And for our partners, this revolves around a readiness not only to commit, but to be accountable. And therefore, in 2018, we created the Mutual Accountability Mechanism. It's an accountability framework that supports governments in achieving their SDG 6.1 and 6.2 targets through collaborative multi-stakeholder action. The Mutual Accountability Mechanism, we call it the MOM because we can't resist acronyms in our world. It requires engagement of all relevant actors to build a constructive culture of accountability under government leadership. So what does this mean? It means that governments take the driver's seat and they work together with sector actors, civil society, external support agencies, the private sector, utilities and regulators, academia, and they work together to identify priorities and find solutions to longstanding challenges, articulating a shared vision for a country's water, sanitation, and hygiene sector and its relationship to connected sectors. Developed through a multi-stakeholder national process, the commitments feed into existing monitoring frameworks. So through linkages with existing national plans and strategies, as well as connecting to global commitments such as the SDGs or nationally determined contributions of the Paris Agreement. Their relevance thereby extends beyond SDG 6 to the entire SDG agenda. So what have we learned? Number one, we've learned that making commitments and holding ourselves accountable for delivering on them is not a linear process. It's a process of dialogue that requires support throughout. Dialogue that includes the voices of diverse stakeholders strengthens the quality of the process. This is number two, the dialogue is fundamental for interrogating whether our efforts are effective in reaching the furthest left behind and identifying opportunities to make improvements and to course correct. And third, creating opportunities for review at national and global level is critical for spurring continued examination of progress on stated commitments. Multi-stakeholder platforms and joint sector reviews are key opportunities at the national level. At the global level, SWA's cycle of high-level convenings, where progress is showcased, they play an important role towards by providing a key moment that all of our partners can work towards. During our most recent sector ministers meeting in May, one of the most cited takeaway messages was the need to improve accountability. In the discussions, ministers recognized that transparency and accountability lead to trust, and that trust triggers the availability of resources critical for supporting the systems we need for achieving universal access. Through the work done with the Mutual Accountability Mechanism, the SWA partnership is proud to already have 400 commitments from 60 countries and global partners to bring to the 2023 conference table. And more will certainly come between now and March 2023. We believe that the MOM can be a constructive platform for the Water Action Agenda, and we hope that our learnings on how commitments and accountability can work in practice are also useful across the entire sector. We're looking forward to working with all of you to ensure that the 2023 conference results in meaningful and transformative action to secure sanitation and water for all, always and everywhere. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Ms. O'Hanlon. Excellent. Well, now we're going to quickly turn to the perspective on water and climate youth from the Youth Development Plan agenda. So Ms. Danielle Fabiola Camitier, Vice President of the World Youth Parliament for Water. Danielle, we'd like to ask you, youth are very active in the UN 2023 Water Conference preparatory process through the Water and Climate Youth Development Plan agenda. Could you tell us a bit more about that agenda?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Greetings to everyone from Canada. So the Water and Climate Youth Development Plan and Agenda, YDPA, is an initiative being developed by Unify in collaboration with other youth networks, including the World Youth Parliament for Water. The YDPA aims to present the officially consolidated inputs of youth to the historic UN 2023 Water Conference and put young people at the center of water and climate action. Basically, the YDPA is a compilation of youth perspectives on water and climate challenges. The YDPA was well highlighted during the Dushanbe water process, and the youth from around the world contributed to it towards UN 2023 and beyond. So they contributed to it through a survey which intended to capture their perspectives and bring them forward during the Dushanbe conference. The survey was a very good opportunity for the youth to also contribute directly to this process at Dushanbe. In conclusion, the YDPA is a collective effort from youth to different stakeholders in water and climate, to which I remind you an extract from the Dushanbe Final Declaration. It says, the heads of delegation having met in Dushanbe on 6 to 9 June 2022 agreed on to support and encourage the participation of young people to play an important role in the UN 2023 Water Conference, and further note, with interest, the development of this Water and Climate Youth Development Plan agenda. Finally, at the opening of the Youth and Children's Water Forum in Dushanbe, Noémie Plumier, the Strategic Partnership Facilitator at the World Youth Parliament for Water, and the Youth Advisor at the Water and Climate Coalition, introduced a new target and commitment from the youth, for the youth, with the youth, the 30-30-30 target. With this target, the golden standard should be 30% of youth inclusion and representation below 30 years old by 2030 at all levels from all sectors and stakeholders. The question that I have for you all now is, will you commit and join us? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Camitier. Wonderful and a fabulous target and commitment. I look forward to talking further about that. We're going to quickly turn. We have 2 more interventions and then we'll open the floor for questions. And I really appreciate the speakers keeping to their time. It's great and leaves us more time for discussion. So next, we're going to look at the call for action to accelerate gender equality in the water domain. So Ms. Michela Mileto, coordinator of UNESCO World Water Assessment Program, and Ms. Lesha Whitmer, advocacy lead for the Women for Water Partnership. The call to action to accelerate gender equality in the water domain was mentioned in the Dushanbe Water Conference Declaration. What is CFA and how will the call catalyze action?
Good morning, dear delegates and participants, and thank you, Madam Moderator, for the question and opportunity. In 2020, the UNESCO WAP Water and Gender Working Group undertook an analysis on the progress of gender equality in the water sector in the last 25 years. Can I have the next slide, please? This analysis really revealed a huge lack of data and information, and that progress to achieve water and gender goals was too slow and off track. We then need a bolder, urgent, multi-level actions. Next slide, please. Based on this global multi-sectoral assessment, we distilled 5 overarching recommendations for the call to trigger concrete actions on the ground, and they are: first, foster women leadership beyond participation, for example, by implementing capacity development for all. act upon principle of gender equal funding. An example, through investment which promote women's leadership. Third, narrow the policy practice gap, for example, by strengthening regulatory frameworks and accountability mechanism, counterfight unjust social norm and stereotype, and last but not least, prioritize the collection of sex disaggregated data to inform water policies and projects, like what WAP is already committed and do on the ground with capacity program and project on gender analysis in water management. The call, which fully aligns with the water action agenda, is supported by a global multi-stakeholder coalition consisting of member states, international regional organizations, NGOs, and so on. The members are active in advocacy, knowledge development, cooperation, and action implementation. So far, we have over 140 members and 14 champion countries and 3 regional bodies. So the coalition is open, and you can join it by simply sending an expression of interest to the dedicated email address that you can see on the slide. And with this, I give the floor to Leisha. Over to you, Leisha.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Michaela. And I think this is already part of our commitments as women working on more gender equality in the water sector. And I think I can safely say, Michaela, you and all our friends are heavily committed to continue this in the best way we can. Can I see the next slide, please? So one thing that I think is a positive is that we finally had quite a few interesting remarks in the Dushanbe Declaration, and we're grateful to the International Advisory Committee. And I think that was already a good example, and I hope we can keep following that, because it was a very interactive, multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder process. And I compliment the government of Tajikistan for that. And I hope that in that same spirit and same ideas, we can continue towards 2023. Another one that we started also here in New York is involve other networks. And we had long conversations with the Women Major Group representatives here in New York to make sure that next year, so that would be our first new commitment, we will have an awareness raising, information exchange, whichever you like to call it, during the Commission on the Status of Women, co-organized together with UN Women. The format still to be decided, but also to lead up to the big conference. And like I said on the sheets, it's extremely important to find like-minded people who are maybe not always aware of the importance and the link between women participation and gender and water. But the minute you start talking to them about it, it's like a wake-up call. And thank you, Liana, for reminding me, because that's one other good reason to also, in the cooperation between WAP and Women for Water, is that UN Water decided to have a dedicated World Water Development Report, either in 2025 or 2026, on the theme of water and women and gender. And we're very pleased to have that, and hope that the inputs and the research we're no doubt have to do for that will also be reflected already in 2023, or 2023 will learn us what maybe should be in there. I think there's one more slide, please.
If you could please take it quickly.
Yes, I will. I think I already said most of it. Great. I reiterate what Michaela already said, that the collection of data is extremely important. But one of our commitments is that we want to enhance and facilitate citizens to collect data, because it will help to build trust. It will help to build numbers, and we think that is also a very, very important step. And we're not finished yet, but please be sure that in this type of collaboration we will continue, and we want more people for the coalition. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. And so now we'll have our final intervention before opening to some questions, is specifically on looking at adapting to climate change and managing water, and the relevance of those things to each other. So Mr. Thomas Revermark, director of the Swedish water house, SIWI. Mr. Revermark, SIWI helped deliver the water pavilion at COP26. In the lead up to COP27, what is SIWI's vision for synergizing the commitments for the climate change agenda and the water agenda?
Well,
and if you can keep to your time, please. Thanks.
Thank you. I will try to. Your Excellencies, colleagues, it's a privilege for me and colleagues at SIWI to be given this opportunity. And thank you also for raising very important questions about synergies between climate action and water action. At SIWI, we firmly believe that this is the only way to achieve both the 2030 agenda and the bold climate initiatives needed. Luckily, the coming year will offer unprecedented opportunities to strengthen these links, and at SIWI we are ready to contribute in the best viable way. The UNFCCC COP27 is of course one such very important event. Last year at COP26 in Glasgow, SIWI led the creation of the first ever water pavilion in the blue zone of UNFCCC COP. Mobilizing more than 30 partners and over 200 participating organizations, including governments, UN agencies, NGOs, and private sectors actors. This reality was only possible through a vision for the water pavilion that was grounded in cross-sectoral collaboration, inclusivity, and a strong orientation towards actions and solutions. One of the most important outcomes excuse me, of the water pavilion was to unite the global water community to elevate water's catalytic role in climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building. We did so by collaborating as part of a joint strategy, aligning our key messages and building a coherent evidence-based narrative, and pooling our resources and networks together. This year, on the road to COP27 in Egypt and the 2023 Water Conference, SIWI is once again committing to advancing the Water for Climate momentum. We will play an active role in the Water Pavilion as a steering committee member, supporting the Egyptian Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. We are partners to the COP27 presidency flagship initiative on water called Aware, and we are a focal point representing water stakeholders in the UNFCCC Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action. Across these opportunities and platforms, we will continue to stay true to our vision of cross-sectoral collaboration, inclusivity, and our insistence on solutions. SIWI has youth, human rights, and gender as cross-cutting themes for all that we do and for the work on climate and sustainability overall. The meaningful inclusion of those usually not represented constitutes a very core value. These principles will be reflected in our work on helping to steer the fast-growing body of the Water for Climate commitments towards the UN 2023 Water Conference. In this vein, it is our hope going forward to harness our global convening power through the SIWI-hosted World Water Week to ensure a steady and dynamic drumbeat for a water climate commitments, promises, and pledges, so that they all materialize into action in service of the Water Action Decade and the 2030 Agenda. Most welcome all to further elevate and take the dialogue forward in sessions, panel discussions, and bilateral meetings at this year's World Water Week, and if not in person, online. Thank you very much, and I'm also available for questions afterwards.
Thank you so much, Mr. Revermark. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to each of the panelists for their interventions. Mr. Henk Ovink had called for capacity and frameworks to deliver on commitments. And I think what we've heard today is a series of incredible institutions and partnerships and precisely the frameworks that we're looking for and we need to lean into as we advance towards 2030. We had an initial question in the chat, and the chat is very active. If you haven't been paying attention to it, I highly encourage you to go and engage there. Feel free to ask very specific questions to the speakers, and please do try to respond where possible. So an initial question that I would like to pose to Ms. Danielle Cametier was around the engagement of indigenous populations. And I think in general, the youth movement looks to engage minority voices and the unheard in a really radical way that perhaps some of the older institutions and movements have not yet adapted to. So Danielle, I'd love to hear from you on any recommendations you have to all those in the room on how we can engage indigenous populations, but also just perhaps marginalized and minority. Oh, Danielle, we can't hear you. If you unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for the question. Sorry, I got distracted. Can you repeat it, just the end of the question, please?
Of course. Yes. So the youth movement is fabulous at engaging in really inventive ways marginalized communities. We had a question in the chat about specifically the engagement of indigenous populations, but was wondering if you could speak to some of the ideas and approaches that your organization is using.
Thank you very much. So one of the ideas that I can put forward is the global youth movement as well, that our organization is part of. So it is a movement that has been created by the International Secretary for Water and all the different organizations in the water sphere, youth organization, water and climate sphere, gathered there to put forward the voices basically of all the youth. So I will definitely suggest to join the movement, the global movement, if the indigenous people are part of a water youth network. So it would be great to be part of this global movement as well, because we are working together with the UN towards the 2023 conference. So that's one of the ideas that I could share.
Thank you, Ms. Committee. Wonderful. And I see we have two questions with hands up. We will try to take them in the time. We just have a few moments, but I'll go first to Nazakat Isaeva. Please go ahead and ask your question, and if possible, direct it to a specific panelist. If not, I'll assign it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening from Tajikistan. I'm Nazakat Isaeva from UN Women Tajikistan office, and I would like just to comment to the gender acceleration to the water domain, and to underline that UN Women Tajikistan office was one of the co-organizers of the Women Water Forum within the second Dushanbe Action Conference. And we would like to underline that within the conference, we have the very specific and very key issues discussed within quite a diverse group of women experts. And I would like just to add on those elements that were highlighted by my colleagues from UNESCO and Women for Water Partnership, those key elements on financing and partnership mechanisms. We would like still to have them to underline and to participate in the further discussions and bring expertise to the UN 2023 conference. And we already step into discussions here in Tajikistan with Mr. Sultan Rahimzoda, to setting the tone and to create a vision how we would like to underline and highlight the importance of women's participation in the women in this UN 2023 conference, and to broaden the picture, because we were discussing science-based solutions, we were discussing capacity building approaches, and also data gaps. So with this, I would like just to commit and to comment that UN Women, as well as regional offices, we are still committed, and we are going to join our hands with other partners and organizers, to come up with clear vision and with clear concepts on the women and water domain. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we have encouraging to hear about these efforts that are happening around the world, and leading up to the conference, which is precisely what this panel discussion is about. So thank you. We have 2 minutes. So Dhaval Pandya, I see your hand as well. Please, you have the floor.
Hi, my question was, can we consider the rain and snowfall as our resource of water for urban area, rural area, and along with biodiversity? And is it worth investing?
Thank you. Yes, and yes, I did see that question come through the chat. Is there a particular speaker quickly that would want to answer that?
No, I'd be fine if any water specialist will answer this.
Thank you, Mr. Pandya. Go ahead, Jody. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. I can maybe say something there. I mean, I'm at the IAEA where we work with isotopes, and we can quite clearly see the difference between rain and snow from an isotopic perspective. So my position, our position would be that yes, it is worth treating those two separately, looking at them, investing in them. Because we see changes in the relative contribution of both. And this is going to affect different countries in different ways. And so I think it's important to have a good understanding of the contribution of both. And that requires investment in both of those different water sources, of water resources. I don't know whether somebody else has a different perspective, but certainly it's something that's isotopically very easy to differentiate.
Thank you, Jody. Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for panel one, but just thank you so much. I really appreciate the interventions and the vibrant discussion in the chat. The Toilet Board Coalition is focused on accelerating business solutions to SDG 6, and so it's always really fascinating to hear about some of the other very complementary initiatives that are happening on the ground and leading up to this incredible event. So Kellyanne, I hand it back over to you and then on to panel two. Thank you, everyone.
Great, Alex, thank you so much. I think for moderating that really engaging discussion. And I think it's been fascinating to hear kind of the different angles that we have today coming from different members and partners. I think we've also seen some very actionable suggestions on how we can actually put the water action agenda into action in a way that really sticks with the principles of being inclusive and participatory and making those cross-sectoral linkages, linking water action with also these other related sectors and processes with DRR and the Sendai framework and the climate and COP processes, as well as kind of the broader SDG implementation and review. So thank you so much, Alex, for that moderation. And as you said, we're moving on now to our second panel discussion and kind of framing this one. Many of you are probably familiar that we've had the SDG 6 summary progress update reports, and these followed on after the initial SDG 6 synthesis report, and that's where we've generated now these trends that we're looking at. And when we talk about this need to move 4 times faster, we must really look at how we are going to do that in practice. How do we change our trajectory, our acceleration over these next 8 years to be able to make the progress that we need to achieve our goals. So one of the key elements, of course, of the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework is to focus on concrete country support, because we know that that's where results happen on the ground. So in our panel that we have now coming up, we will ask our members and partners to really discuss how they see accelerating and driving progress at the country level. So now I'm going to hand actually back over to Ms. Jody Miller, who is the head in the section of isotope hydrology at the International Atomic Energy Agency. So Jody, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. And I just want to reiterate, I think, along with Alex, that the ideas, the thoughts, the acceleration concepts that we see being presented here are really important for us as well, to better understand how we can target our programs. And so I personally, I find this type of a dialogue really extremely valuable to our actions, and I'm sure that everybody else is finding the same thing. To start with, we're going to hear about the SDG 6 Capacity Development Initiative. It's a very important program to accelerate capacity development. And we're going to hear from Ms. Madhushree Chatterjee, who is the Chief Natural Resources Interlinkages Branch Division for Sustainable Development Goals at UN DESA. Ms. Chatterjee, as the coordinator for the SDG 6 Capacity Development Initiative, what is your vision for using the initiative to accelerate the implementation of SDG 6 at the country level?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Yes?
Yes, very much.
Thank you. So, dear colleagues, thank you for organizing this timely meeting. It is also very nice to see so many familiar faces and so much enthusiasm on water-related issues. Now, diving straight into the question that I've been asked, so DESA's perspective and objectives on the Capacity Development Initiative really came from listening to the various countries that presented their voluntary national reviews at the HLPF. As as many of you know, this is sort of the main intergovernmental platform which reviews progress towards the SDGs. So we were really listening carefully to what came out of those VNRs, where member states mentioned that there is a need for looking at SDG 6 in a more holistic manner, looking at how SDG 6 interlinks with other goals, if you will, such as with health, education, and climate change, and so on and so forth. And in addition, we also heard that many governments are struggling with the implementation of SDG 6 because of insufficient institutional, human, financial, and also technological capacities. So, these messages that came out of the VNRs led to this initiative, or led to DESA's objectives for the initiative, if you will, because we all realize that the lack of these resources is detrimental to tackling water and sanitation challenges and the achievement of sustainable water management and sanitation for all. But of course, this is also so important for the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Now, if we look at the targets, at some of the targets of SDG 6, SDG 6.A calls for capacity building support to developing countries in water and sanitation related activities and programs. So we know that capacity development is indispensable really for integrated water resources management, for water and sanitation services, and so on and so forth, as many of our previous speakers have mentioned. Now, the global acceleration framework, which was also mentioned by many of the speakers before, identified capacity development as one of 5 accelerators for SDG 6 implementation, along with financing, data and information, innovation, and governance. Now, and in addition to that, in support of capacity development, the modalities resolution for the Water Conference also encourages all partners to support the implementation of the 2030 agenda through capacity development. And we now know that capacity development will be one of the major cross-cutting subjects at the conference. So as we've heard, against this backdrop, UN Water launched last year, launched in 2020, this capacity development initiative. And, I am really thrilled to say that, we are delighted to coordinate this initiative with UNESCO. So this is the backdrop against which we have the CDI, if you will. So what do we hope that the capacity development initiative will do? First of all, it will serve as an interagency coordination platform for freshwater sanitation and hygiene-related capacity development. We hope that it will enable the UN system and its multi-stakeholder partners to align efforts and deliver as one in support of countries, of course. The UN system and other development partners will respond to the country's capacity development requests, keeping in mind that the initiative and follow-up in any country will be demand-driven, and it will respect the country's ownership. Then, through dialogues at integrated national workshops, we hope that the initiative will aim to identify capacity gaps in the country and raise awareness of capacity needs at the intersectoral, interministerial, and multi-stakeholder levels, keeping in mind the whole holistic nature of the 2030 agenda and the interlinkages between SDG 6 and other SDGs. And the initiative will help countries to access capacity development expertise available within the UN Water family. Now, of course, all of this will be done at the country level in coordination with the resident coordinators and country teams, so that we can have a one UN approach to capacity development, so that countries can, where needed, start their national plans related to SDG 6, or wherever needed, can build upon and draw upon the expertise of the UN water system for their own capacity development needs in water and related areas. So I would really like to welcome, in closing, the participation of partner countries in this initiative, and of course, other UN system entities and other stakeholders to join this initiative along with DESA and UNESCO. So Ms. Miller, I would like to stop here now, and I'm happy to take questions as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that initiative. It's a very important program, and capacity development, as you said, is one of the important accelerators, and it's very much a cross-cutting accelerator, and something that is very close to my heart, coming from an educational background. We're going to move on next to listening to national water leaders by Mr. Oksay Unver, apologies if I've mispronounced your name there, who is from the Arizona State University and is a member of the Water Policy Group. Mr. Unver, based on Water Policy Group's work, what are the risks and challenges to the achievement of the SDG 6 targets, and how should we encourage relevant stakeholders to make commitments?
Thank you, Jody. It's Olcay Ünver. It's a Turkish name and hard to guess. Last year, the Water Policy Group, of which I'm a member, conducted a survey of national water leaders. We had responses from 88 countries. Out of that, 58 were ministers or water agency heads, representing about 75% of the global population. And then based on that, we issued the inaugural Global Water Policy Report this year. So we had a number of questions in our survey that would provide very relevant input into both your question and potentially the 2023 Water Conference. By the way, this survey and the report was our commitment that we registered with the UN Water Action Space. So we have delivered on that. So the first set of questions to the water leaders was about the risks and challenges that they were facing in water resources management sustainably. The highest water-related risks, which are outside the immediate control of governments, were listed by the national leaders were climate change by far, followed by competition from water using sectors, and followed by worsening floods and droughts. And when we put floods and droughts with climate change, we see that water leaders see climate issues as a major risk to proper water resources management. The second part of this set of questions was about the challenges to proper water resources management, and challenges are within the control of the governments. And they, again, with a large margin, they indicated that the major challenge they had was the prioritization of water issues within governments, so political prioritization, and the integration of water issues with other sectors at the both policy level and the implementation level. So that provides, I think, a lot of input into finding solutions in dealing with that. A second set of questions we had was about COVID-19 and how it had impacted priorities. And a majority of the respondents said that COVID-19 had not affected the prioritization of water and sanitation services in government policies. To our surprise, they also noted that COVID-19 had made stakeholder engagement a lot more challenging than it previously was. The third set of questions was about the accelerators, the SDG 6 accelerators. We asked the leaders if they find the SDG 6 targets challenging, impossible, already achieved, easy to achieve, etc. And a large majority of them listed SDG 6 targets are either challenging or impossible to achieve. And when we asked them why, the reason for that was and how accelerators could help, they listed 2 accelerators as their major indicators, governance and financing. As the income level increased, governance issues played a bigger role, and developing countries listed financing as the major barrier, and then governance as the second one. Data and information and capacity development were listed also as important, and we concluded that innovation as an accelerator is not adequately understood or used by national water leaders. Another set of questions was about development assistance, ODA, and there was a very clear division of opinions between developed and developing countries in terms of the adequacy of the current engagements. And the last set of questions was about groundwater, which is the theme for this year. And a majority of national water leaders said groundwater was essential for their country's future water supply, and only a few of them considered that groundwater was being used sustainably. So in closing, the answer to the question, how can we encourage relevant stakeholders to make commitments, lies in the fact that water leaders think that a lot is happening outside their control or their realm, and the solutions should be coming from other sectors using multi-stakeholder forums, intersectoral opportunities, and making everyone a water stakeholder rather than everybody working in their respective silos. In closing, the Water Policy Group intends to conduct a supplementary survey in order to inform the 2023 United Nations Water Conference, and hopefully we will be reporting on that early next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very interesting information there, particularly for me, coming from a groundwater background, that so many people, so many participants in the surveys regarded groundwater as essential, but many people regarded it or thought it was not sustainable. We need to do more work there. Also that people perhaps don't understand the intersection between all the accelerators. I personally think that innovation is one of the main drivers to help us achieve many of the other accelerators. So we need to perhaps work more on our messaging there. Okay, so let's move on. The next theme we're going to be looking at is country acceleration case studies. And I'd like to ask Ms. Marianne Cadillan, Senior Water Advisor from UNDP. Could you tell us more about how the SDG 6 country acceleration case studies support sharing best practices for countries? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Well, we learned we need to move 4 times faster to achieve SDG 6 by 2030. So with this speed, we must start paying much closer attention to the direction in which we are going. So hence, UN Water's expert group on the 2030 agenda conceived the country acceleration case studies to explore countries' pathways towards achieving accelerated progress and document and share good practice for achieving the SDGs. And there will be a total of 9 case studies, and 3 of them are ready this year. We have Costa Rica presenting systemic change in ways to manage water resources. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. We have Pakistan that have expanded hand hygiene coverage in large part thanks to a national program championed by the head of state and with important lessons for COVID-19 recovery. And in Senegal, there is good work relations with basin organizations around the Senegalo-Mauritanian aquifer basin shared with Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Mauritania, and Senegal. Next slide, please. Now, I want to let you know a little bit about the findings, next slide, about Costa Rica. And well, as many of you know, I mean, Costa Rica is already a world leader in sustainability and integrated environmental management, as well as payment for ecosystem services. And also has a high coverage level, like 98% access water. Yet the sustainability of those services are under increasing pressure. And this is because of economic pressures for more extractive resource use, also unsustainable management and urban pressures, and especially also very high use of agrochemicals. And so to address these challenges, there are a set of methodologies available for water service providers or basin managers. And these include then, of course, like, payment for ecosystem services, of course, or purchasing land in order to protect infiltration zones or sources. Also, these to support land restoration and protecting forests and ensuring sustainable practices in agriculture, forestry, and pastoralism, especially in sensitive areas. And also build infrastructure for increasing infiltration and groundwater recharge. Also, these actions involve studies and awareness raising, even to create a new culture that cherishes water more. But above all, and this is the gist of this case, the water service providers were authorized by the sector regulator, the ARECEP, to charge the users for the cost of this environmental management. And this is currently applied by actually 4 service providers. And well, it's always, especially these times, it's always challenging with tariffs because of the economic situation. And in Costa Rica also inequalities are increasing. But there is also important community support for combating environmental degradation and addressing especially pollution. So And also it has been fairly low cost in where it has been applied. The additional charge has been up around 1% of the existing tariff. Yet there has been really effective impact on the protection of the water resources. So, and I believe that the success resides greatly in the empowerment of the local actors, of their service providers in this case, to determine with the communities that they serve, which are the most important environmental protection activities in the given area. Also, on the broader significance of this case, I'd like to highlight not only the sustainability of the water services through this holistic management, but also the systemic enhancement of accountability to the users and communities, involving them in ensuring the long-term sustainability of the water services they receive. I'd also highlight the self-determination or empowerment as utilities and service providers this way create cash flow and action space for themselves to take a long-term vision. The use of water tariffs to finance nature-based solutions is becoming increasingly common in the Americas. So I think this is happening. So we are seeing this systemic change in many places. In regions where tariffs and the whole issue of affordability is a bigger challenge, I wish that external support would be directed towards enabling the users to be able to pay for services. Supporting that often tenuous accountability relationship between users and providers to empower service providers and their communities to determine their own investment priorities. They have the knowledge and the incentives to do that better than external financiers. Last slide, please.
Marianne, if I might just interrupt, I just want to remind you that it's a 5-minute presentation, so I need to ask you if you could wrap up relatively quickly, please. Thank you.
So yes, then please just join us in these case studies will be presented at the Stockholm World Water Week more in depth. So there I see it's not in focus on the slide, but it's on 1st September and it's an on-site and an online event where the 3 case studies will be presented. Thank you so much.
Great. So thank you, Marianne. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I didn't realize you were quite so close to the end, but thank you very much for that really interesting presentation. And I think understanding the details of different environments and different contexts in different countries is very important for us to be able to move the whole system forward. So thank you very much for that. All right, so next we're going to move to financing roundtable, and I'd like to ask Ms. Again, I apologize if I mispronounce Ord Fanot, who's an economist at the OECD. We understand that the OECD is collaborating on a roundtable on financing in Geneva in early 2023. In your view, what is the role of the roundtable in preparing the financing community for the UN 2023 Water Conference?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and thank you very much to UN Water for inviting me to speak to this event. So I'll first say one word about the OECD, the Roundtable on Financing Water, and then I'll present the main objectives, format, and process for the Roundtable on Financing Water scheduled in Geneva early 2023 on the path to the UN Water Conference. So the Roundtable on Financing Water was set up by the OECD, the Netherlands, the World Bank, and the World Water Council, with the idea of bringing to the same table the financing community and the water community. Since 2017, the Roundtable met around regions in America, in Europe, in Asia, to analyze regional specificities and catalyze action, often in partnerships with the MDBs of the different regions, and around specific themes, such as water for agriculture and water and climate action. The Roundtable engages a diversity of actors, governments, regulators, private financiers, development financing institutions, international organizations, academic, civil society organizations, focused on finding novel ideas and solutions that accelerate investment, contributing to water security, and redirect investments that increase vulnerability to water-related risks. So what are the main objectives of the Roundtable scheduled in Geneva early 2023? The idea is to consult with the financing community in preparation of the 2023 UN Water Conference to discuss and gather the potential messages, solutions, and commitments of different parts of the financing community that will be conveyed and implemented during and after the conference. And what would be the format of this conference? So of this roundtable, sorry, the roundtable is scheduled around 7-9 February 2023. This is to be confirmed. It would be 2 or 3 half days with 2 or 3 sessions per day. It would be in Geneva, Switzerland, and it would be an in-person meeting with hybrid possibility, at least partly. So what is the process to get there? During the time between now and February, we will engage with the financing community to collect the different messages and commitments, see how they combine, potentially looking for consistencies, gaps, and we would be happy, if appropriate, to facilitate their inputs and contribution to the 5 background notes for the interactive dialogues of the conference. During the conference, the idea is that we'll use the output of the roundtable, and we would be happy to report back to the UN Water Conference on messages, commitments, and solutions from different actors of the financing committee for the Water Action Agenda to be launched at the conference. And after the conference, we would be keen to involve the financing community to engage in the implementation of the Water Action Agenda. Indeed, we are offering that the roundtable could be used after March 2023 to implement the financial dimension of this commitment. For instance, that's part of an ongoing discussion with African partners. And to finish, there are synergies with the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, including to support the follow-up of commitments and the sustained implementation of the Water Action Agenda, as well as a planned socio-economic dialogues. We are exploring if the roundtable could be convened as a societal dialogue for the Global Commission. That's an option, and that's not confirmed yet, but we are thinking about it. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have questions, please reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I think, as we've seen from some of the earlier presentations, that financing is clearly a very important part of reaching the SDG 6 goals. I would like to move along, though, in order to stay on time. And the next presentation is going to be on getting financial quality and quantity right. And the presentation is by Mr. Amjad Al-Mahdi, Water Sector Lead, Division Mitigation Adaptation, Green Climate Fund. Mr. Al-Mahdi, how does the GCF's investment strategy support both the quantity and quality of water financing?
Thanks, Judy, for that great question. And let me try to answer that, taking the finance has been highlighted by previous speaker and panelists like Oakley and Wood about as a key barrier for country accelerations. The Green Climate Fund, it's really a critical element for Paris Agreement, and it is the world's largest climate fund mandated really to support the low emission and climate resilience development pathways. In our investment framework, we actually defined some guidelines that have been approved by our board in 2020, and those guidelines really telling us to maintain 50-50 balance between adaptation and mitigation in terms of the fund, but also to maintain that 50% of adaptation funding for developing countries like small island, least developed countries, and also African states and Americas as well. And also try to keep that geographic balance and also increase the funding through a direct access entity and maximize really the engagement of private sector and mobilize the private finance as well in terms of banks. At GCF, in terms of quantity, we really provide different financial instruments that really support the countries and to tackle the water issues like grant, concessional loan, and syndicate loan, private equity, guarantees, and so on. But we also encourage different other instruments. In our water portfolio, we have allocated 2.8 billion, that including 1.3 billion from GCF fund. So that show really the water is one of our key result area in GCF. In terms of the quality, in terms of the finance quality to the water sector, as we understand really the structure of the water and sanitation infrastructure, the increasing population, the weak water resource management, and unavoidable water shortage we have. So at GCF, we are really using our resources to drive paradigm shift that really based on 4 pillars. One is really transformational planning and programming, and that's through integrated climate development policy that really promote climate finance coherence. Second, to catalyze climate innovation, and that's through technology development transfer with enabling environment or enabling investment environment, including conservation, preservation, sanitation, asset class, and so on. The third pillar is really mobilizing finance at the scale, and that to scale up successful climate investment, to de-risk investment and encourage private sector or mobilize private sector. The fourth pillar here is really the coalition and knowledge to scale up success, and that's through creating and sharing knowledge about the harmonization of the methodology to assess climate risk, but also financial decisions for sustainable development. And finally, we are really in the process now to release the water security guideline or strategy that will lay out really our GCF strategy and guide our thinking and investment in the water security area. That really define 2 clear pathways for paradigm shift. The first one is really focused on mitigation through enhanced water conservation, efficiency, and water reuse by focus on water demand management, competitive water use, but also treating water as a new asset. So this is one of our new initiatives. The second pathway is really to strengthen integrated water resource management, and that protection from water-related disaster and preserve the water resources, enhance resilience for water supply and sanitation service, but also including another flagship for us, which is really looking at the well-managed mix of an integration of gray-green infrastructure to enhance really adaptability and resilience for coastal and upstream communities. And to close, really, we are at GCF catalyze climate innovation, and that by encouraging innovation in policy, business, technology, and finance. And least is really, maybe it sounds more technical, but in a very nutshell, we support transformational planning and programming. We catalyze innovation. We mobilize finance at the scale. We align finance with sustainable development. In the water sector, we focus on SDG 6 in relation to SDG 13. And finally, we also help to deliver innovative solutions such as new asset class for water reuse and sanitation, and well-managed mix and integration of gray-green infrastructure to enhance the adaptability and resilience of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, that information. I think that's a very important summary. I particularly like the grey-green combination. I was in Cape Town during the Cape Town drought, and I know that this is a very important way of managing water resources, but it does require considerable funding to bring about. That brings us to the last presentation of this session, and that is going to be on the National Water Roadmap towards 2030 SDGs. It's going to be given by Mr. Li-Fang Li, who is the Director, Land and Water Division, FAO. Mr. Li, we know that FAO proposed the National Water Roadmap. What is it exactly, and how will it help to accelerate the implementation of SDG 6 and others at national level?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me clearly. Distinguished guest colleagues, thank you very much for inviting FAO to join this very important discussion. I think we all know that water is the core of sustainable development, and it's also an integral part of many international commitments, include SDG 6, 2030 agenda, NDCs, NARPs, food security, energy security, disaster reduction, etc., etc. And the UN Water's policy report in 2016 pointed out that the dynamic and two ways of interdependence between SDG 6 and every other SDG goals. And also point out the importance to understand and also manage such interlinkages to achieve the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of SDG of the 2030 agenda. Further, in the SDG 6 global acceleration framework, it's further argued and called that global SDG 6 target must be localized and adapted to the country context. So the incoming UN 2023 Conference on Water provide an unprecedented opportunity to really raise the awareness of the water's role in all the economies, in the society, and in enabling a better environment. And as we all learned from the past, we all learned from other sectors that at the end of the day, it is the national implementation mechanisms that really make the difference to all the global targets and commitment. So with that thinking, I feel propose this idea. So what is the National Water Roadmap? I think we look at that potentially the National Water Roadmap could try to have a number of the key elements. For example, firstly, the National Water Roadmap need really to recognize the multiple values of water provided to the social, economic, and environmental perspective. And similar like in the global report that's prepared by the UNDP, at the national level, we also need have that similar kinds of understanding. And secondly, based on such understanding, high-level water management and allocation principles and guidance are really needed. And we see there's a huge gap in many countries, which really make the water allocation and management much more challenging. And through those principles and guidance, it has to answer how the water will be used, how water will be provided in time and in quality to meet all the social, economic, and environmental needs. And through the valuing water and setting up those principles, it will be able to enable countries to make really strategic choices with regard to water allocation to different sectors, different users, different regions, in particular under the increasing water stress and uncertainty in the changing climate. Thirdly, following those principles and objectives, the roadmap could also review and reaffirm the water-related objectives and commitment based on the existing ones in the Agenda 21, in national sustainable development strategies, or in the NDCs, NARPs, water sector plans, water sector strategies. And realizing the urgency to deliver all the SDGs, it can set up a very ambitious target and measures to improve water user efficiency and reduce water pollution across all the sectors. Fourthly, the water roadmap could also develop a concrete actions that help to achieve all the SDGs at the country level by 2030 and to contribute to the International Decade for Action. The roadmap can certainly include actions and plans in subnational level and in river basins, including the transboundary river basins, and link up the water activity to all the other actions in the different sectors. Last but not least, recognizing that water crisis, by large, it's a water governance crisis, and water management decisions are far more political than we realized. The roadmap can include a suite of policy options, potential reforms, and new governance measures in and beyond the water sector, as well as tariffs, pricing, and other economic instruments to enable more effective allocation and more efficient use in the future. It can also include investment priorities, initiatives, projects, and needed partnerships that can help to mobilize the resources from both domestic and also international resources, including from both public and also from the private sector. In terms of how, we see that the National Water Roadmap is really a country-owned commitment, which should be developed through a country-led participatory process that involves all the sectors, all the stakeholders, and potentially through a national water dialogue that's bringing all the different players into the same table, then be able to jointly develop such a roadmap. I think since we proposed this idea, dozens of countries, including the co-host countries, and many number of key international institutions have confirmed their support. And this, the National Water Roadmap will constitute the key contribution to the water action agenda for the next year. We hope many countries could join this effort, could develop this National Water Roadmap, then present those roadmap in March. All completed by the end of next year. And we really look forward to work with all the countries in preparing that roadmap in the coming months. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for that intervention. Again, a lot of good, interesting ideas that intersect in many different ways. I want to just come back to the comments that you're making about the Water Action Decade, because we had a very interesting question that appeared in the chat by Fabrice Fretz. And I believe our co-hosts from Tajikistan and the Netherlands, Sultan and Henk, are still online. And I want to ask them if they maybe have some comment on this question. And the question is, or the comment was, it's still not clear to me how the water action agenda is different from the UN partnership platform or the SDG acceleration actions. I would appreciate some detailed explanations in this regard.
Thank you very much. This is Henk, Ovink and Sultan. We were not able to hear anything that you said, but we got, so it is because of the connection, but we got the question. I think in the context of what Fabrice was asking, and I'll repeat because we didn't hear what you were saying, but to our information, Fabrice was asking, still not clear to me how the water action agenda is different from the UN partnership platform or the SDG acceleration actions. I would truly appreciate some detailed explanation in this regard. Is that indeed the question?
Yes, that was the question, yeah.
So I would, also on behalf of the two of us, try to answer this, but to the very detail, I also look at UN Water, since we are working closely with UN Water and UN DESA to detail this out. So we are in the beginning of working on the technicalities of this. But one, we have a process within the UN where we actually are now in. We are at the HLPF, the High Level Political Forum, where every year we show how progress or not progress on the SDGs is happening. We are not going to substitute that process. Every commitment that feeds into how SDGs are tracked from a member state perspective are within the HLPF process. The water action agenda, neither the UN partnership platform or the SDG acceleration action is something separate. It is all about delivering on the SDGs. So we're not setting up new separate systems that are going to duplicate what's existing. We're going to use what we have. But on top of that, what we said is that all commitments in the context of water across the SDGs, which is a subset of all actions, but where water plays a critical role in delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals, water for health, as we said, water for development, water for climate and resiliency, and so forth, as we listed it yesterday. We pack together in a water action agenda. And then you could see that it is part of the UN partnership platform and the acceleration actions. If you go to the website, you see it is structured in the same way, and those commitments also feed into this broader collection of commitments that we already have and bring together. But there is a challenge when it comes to tracking, follow-up, support, and replication, because the actions we foresee are not only from national governments, they come from local governments, they come from community-led actions, they come from private sector, finance institutes, and more complex, from coalitions between all those stakeholders. And following that through in the context of the SDGs within what we have as UN is not possible. So the Water Action Agenda will also make sure, and this is where we're in the midst of developing, a support mechanism of those commitments in that complexity of partnerships and private sector and beyond. And last, the bringing it together as we have it now does not secure or ensure a support mechanism to make sure the commitment is a success. When the commitment is a success, there is an opportunity to follow up, let alone follow up in the way of scaling and replication. So the Water Action Agenda also aims for that support mechanism in the years to come to make sure that we're able to follow up, follow through, help scale and replicate in strengthening these coalitions, help build this partnership, and make sure that, you know, in the words as also Sultan said, this is a watershed moment for the world. The technicalities of that are in the midst of the making. Right now, every commitment won't fall within the cracks of the system, but will exactly be placed in the UN Partnership Platform and the Acceleration Action. So nothing is lost until 2023, but we're in the midst of developing everything we need to do to be able to support the commitments that will come in from this mix of actors and be able to track, evaluate, and validate what works for scaling and replication. I hope this helps. If anyone from UN Water wants to add what they're developing right now, happy to give them the floor.
Okay, I think also I just comment. Thank you very much for that, Henk. There's also a question in the chat from Isabel. I think it's Kaufman from Switzerland, about hearing more about the support structure mentioned by yourself to help supporting implementation of the voluntary commitments on the Water Action Agenda. I think that you've covered that in your response just now, but Isabel, if there is something that is still unclear to you, please let us know. We can ask Henk to re-clarify. There's a few comments that have come, or a few questions that have come through in the chat, but I see a raised hand from Naval Vaswani. I'd like to hand the floor to you now, if you would like to ask your question. Please let us know if there's a person that you want to direct that question to in particular. Naval, are you there? I think your screen looks frozen. So maybe we'll
Jody, I think you went on mute. Yeah.
Sorry, apologies there. There's an interesting question here from Niraj Bhatnaja. What is the role on the scale of 1 to 10 in climate change? How much effort needs to be made towards climate change? I think that's probably quite a difficult question to ask, and likely to generate everything from a 1 to a 10, but would anybody like to have a comment there? Nobody wants to go out on a limb? Kelly, let's hear from you. You're UN Water. What's UN Water's perspective?
Judy, for putting me on the spot. I mean, I think The way that I would think about that is, I think we're past the point where we can think about things being climate resilient or not climate resilient. And certainly, I think the UNDRR presentation really laid out that, you know, we have many risks, of which climate risks, water scarcity, other risks. We've heard there was an intervention in Yemen around conflict risk. So I think certainly, you know, going forward, I would vote for a 10 on thinking about making sure that what we're doing is risk informed. And I think Heike has also made this point that we can have investments that are linking water and climate and investments that aren't, because everything needs to be very much kind of pulling in the same direction to be able to build resilient services and ensure that resources, ecosystems, and the integration with the water resources management is coherent. But I hope that's I hope that's a good answer. So thank you, and certainly an important one. So Jody, I think, does that bring us now to the end of, I think this has been a really interesting discussion here in this panel too. Anything else before we close it up?
There's just a question to Marianne. The chat keeps jumping around. There was a question to address to Marianne in the chat.
I see it here. It says about Senegal transboundary waters, which other countries in Africa Sahel face the most challenges from this perspective.
Marianne, do you have a comment on that?
Sorry, let me see. I didn't totally get the question. So it's about the transboundary perspective in say. I think that, I mean, just to say that I've seen several chats and I'm trying to respond to them about people interested in the detailed studies. And I think, I mean, the coordination there is by UN Water, and the case study in Senegal is supported by UNECE and UNESCO, and the case study in Pakistan is supported by the WHO and UNICEF. So for more contact, I think that's would be appropriate. And also, of course, to join the webinar, or if you are in person at the Stockholm World Water Week, that's where also you can get more in-depth information about all three of this year's case studies. And I think also, but yeah, coming back to Senegal, I mean, I think there, I mean, the amazing thing is actually, of course, it's the river basin organizations having a working group and being able and uniting across the boundaries. And I think that we have to, all kinds of boundaries, of course, we need to cross them in order to resolve our water issues and protect, in this case, a precious groundwater resource. So, but I'd say just join the next webinar would be my short answer to all these questions. Thank you.
Okay, and if I just follow up on that, Marianne, where else in the Sahel region in Africa do you think the transboundary issue is really pressing?
Ah, okay, thank you. So it's I think yeah, in the all of Sahel, I think that we do have pressing transboundary issues, and I think that I would actually think that some of the most thorny issues are actually where we also have other types of conflicts going on, which is really, really aggravating the whole livelihood situation for the people and the coordination. But I think an interesting thing is that I think that around the Chad Basin Commission, there have been actually possibilities for the existing water cooperation organization existing to also help address other societal challenges in the region. So I would say that, yeah, I mean, the challenges are, of course, transboundary, all of them. I mean, we in the hydrological system, we are, in a sense, all of us connected. I think also the most difficult ones are where we have other types of conflicts going on.
Yeah, okay, thank you. There's some other questions that are coming through in the chat. It is a very, very active chat, and we will look to see whether some of this can be preserved. But I think given the time, I'm going to hand back to Kelly to perhaps close out. I see that there's a couple of hands up, but I'll leave it up to Kelly as to whether we have still have time, because we are now a little bit over time.
Yeah,
Over
thank
to
you
you,
so
Kelly.
much, Jody. Maybe so please do keep sending the questions and we'll try to reply to as many as possible. But I think just being a bit mindful of time, let's go ahead and close the event. And if anyone still has a question, I'm happy to stay after if anyone wants to have more discussions, but let's go ahead and close. Just I know that time is never enough. It feels in some ways, Jody, like the conversation's just even getting started, but just really wanted to thank everyone for joining today and really for this fruitful discussion. I think it's clear that there is a huge amount of interest, that there is a lot that's already happening. I think the presentation from the co-hosts, the speakers, and the panels have really offered so many valuable perspectives to think about how we can shape this water conference opportunity, how we can contribute to these transformative water action agenda commitments, and also how we can really accelerate progress at country level. I think, Jody, we've seen already that there's many pieces of the puzzle out there and many promising initiatives, but our challenge now is how do we bring this together? And I think there was a good comment in the chat box earlier from Gerard about how do we make sure that all of this action leads to acceleration and impact. So it's going to have to be that lift up and forward. So that's, I think, for all of us to take away and really to think through. So I think now I did want to mention, because I know there's so much interest in being involved, and I just wanted to mention really quickly a few next steps of things that you can do to kind of stay a part of this momentum. So even today, in just a couple hours, you can join the webcast for the final of the 3 water-related events here at the High Level Political Forum in New York. There will be the flagship event that is co-hosted by the Netherlands and Tajikistan on water and climate adaptation, 2 sides of the same coin. So I think the in-person is closed. It's been very, very oversubscribed, but you can watch it on the webcast. So we'll share the details for that. I saw Cheng has already shared how you can join the dedicated mailing list for the UN 2023 conference. And that is constantly coming out with updates about how can you get your stakeholder accreditation, how can you send inputs for consultations. So this is a very active email list, and I would really encourage everyone to stay tuned to that one to receive updates about the conference. Just looking a little bit more ahead at the next official preparatory event, which is going to be a meeting that will be held by the President of the General Assembly. We understand from the President-elect it's going to be taking place in late October, early November. We're still in the process of refining the exact date. So that will be another one of these kind of big milestones. But I think what we've learned in this process is that there are many touch points along the way. We've seen today that there's some sessions that are coming up and dialogues at World Water Week in Stockholm. There will also be the UNGA meeting in September. So I think certainly there will be plenty of opportunities. And I know that the UN Water Technical Advisory Unit is very good about sharing those events. So hopefully everyone can really, be as involved as you want to be. And as Lesha said, it's been great to see all the participation that has happened in the preparation of events like the Dushanbe conference. And I think all of that helps us to work better together, to cooperate and collaborate. We have just 8 months before this big meeting. It seems so far away, but now it feels like it's right around the corner. So really, I think today gives us that opportunity to think, deeper, think further. How are we going to unlock our bottlenecks? How do we overcome the things that hold us back? how can we really bring forward what Hank called the game-changing solutions. I think we've seen these transformative partnerships of where we come together to really set this course to be able to achieve our common goals for water and sanitation. So let's continue, everybody, on this journey together. Let's keep ourselves healthy, energetic, collaborative spirit, so we can really bring forward this momentum and substance. And I think we've all taken the point that we need to make this a historic event for this generation, but also something for the generations to come. So with that, I think we will officially kind of now conclude the event. And then we'll just stay on a little bit longer if anybody has any questions.
All can open the cameras for final pictures, probably the virtual picture.
You want a picture? Okay.
Why not? To save the memories. I mean, it was truly an inspiring, historical, wonderful, insightful session.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That's a super suggestion. So
hold on. Let me take few pictures. Hold on, I'll be sharing otherwise. One more. All on the cameras, right? So I will be charging probably $5 per picture. Is it fine? You have to come up with the innovative solutions.
I love the entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh, that's it.
Sector.
You involve indigenous people, they will come up with the new solutions. So water solutions will be by the indigenous people. They have solutions. Great. I'm from Tharparkar, Pakistan, which has a water scarcity. We love water. Rather, water is everything for us. So we value the water.
Thank you so much, Naval. And I think we couldn't on a better note than that one.
Every speaker, I tell you from the core of my heart, from the millions and the millions of the people from Rajasthan, from Gujarat, from Tharparkar, they know the value and importance of a single drop of water, how we care about this water. So every speaker, every panelist, every coordinator, every campaigner who are the participating today, who are the organizing such an excellent, insightful, impactful event. I really appreciate, I really thankful, and let's celebrate, let's wish for the best, and let's hope for the humanity and society collectively. With a collective wisdom, we will solve the problems world is facing today and in the near future.
Great, Naval. Thank you very much for those words of wisdom. I really feel energized, and I think yes, the spirit of partnership is perfect. Oh, you went on mute again, Naval. Okay.
I will be coming to join the Water Week and then the Water Conference as well. Super. So thank you so very much, these wonderful people, these excellent people with a pure soul, with a great spirit, with a great mindset, with an intentions, with a vision, with priorities for the people who are marginalized because of the water. Because you see, without water and without fuel, life is dull. Look from our eyes, what does water mean to us? Millions, rather hundreds of millions of the people, they are striving for the water, right? So this topic is like something, the holy hymns from the Vedas. This is something from the holy hymns from the Bibles. It is like that. Believe you me. I mean, you have won the hearts of the people, and today the intensity, the intention I saw, I'm pretty sure we will resolve these problems with the technology, with the innovations, with the water caring, with the effective utilizations of water. we will come. And humanity has always come up with the new solutions. This is how we have reached from 10,000 in today's world of solutions. So thank you so very much. I don't know. I was not prepared to say this, but it came spontaneously, impulsively from my heart to say thank you to everyone. And I don't know how to pronounce Mariana, Kelly, Audi, Madhushri is probably from Rajasthan or Maharashtra. She can understand my intensity, my purity of thoughts and languages and the words. And who so many other speakers, every speaker, probably let me name Daniel, and there was another guy who was an awesome so, and Jody Miller, thank you so very much. Everyone came up with the great solutions. So call me. I will be joining to represent the people, millions of the peoples, rather billions of the peoples. Thank you so much. I have taken your time. This is the symbol of peace. This is a symbol of love. This is a symbol of coexistence. This is a symbol of smiling. So let's have with my humble request, can we join our hands and say to ourselves that we will resolve the problem. This is a pledge to ourselves. This is a pledge to the motherland. This is a pledge to Mother Nature as well. Nature is calling to us to heal the wounds we have given to the nature in terms of carbonizing, in terms of so many toxic things we have given to the Mother Nature. It's time to take back and give the Mother Nature what it really needs. So care for Mother Nature. Thank you so very much. Love you all. Love you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Naval. And I think that's a perfect note to end on, with a pledge to Mother Nature. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Yeah, I think with that, we'll finally close up here. But thanks so much. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you and really making this happen, because the time is now. Thanks, and have a great rest of the high-level week.
You too. Thank you very much. Take care. Lovely speak, Naval.
Thank you.